Leron sinta, buko ng papaya, dala-dala'y buslo, sisidlan ng bunga. Pagdating sa duloy, nabali ang
Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Risa Lorenzana, Chair of Ako Para sa Bata 2020. The 12th Ako Para sa Bata is presented by the Child Protection Network Foundation and UNICEF. Our theme this year is Care of the Child Against Violence in the Time of Disease. So let us officially begin. I am happy to introduce to you the Chair and Moderator of the session on supporting parents as teachers. She is the head of the section of Developmental Behavioral Pediatrics at the Medical City, a faculty in the section of Developmental Behavioral Pediatrics of UP Philippine General Hospital, the assistant head of the Child Protection Unit PGH. Our dear Ako Para sa Bata community, let us all welcome the chair and moderator of this webinar, Dr. Stella G. Manalo. Over to you, Dr. Manalo.
leron sinta.
Thank you, Dr. Rizzi. Hello everyone at magandang umaga, Pilipinas. Now it's a really good sunny morning here in Pasig. And unlike November 12, when this webinar was originally scheduled dun sa kasagsagan ng Typhoon Ulysses. So appropriately, it was postponed, it was canceled and postponed for today. So this webinar, number 20, is supporting parents as teachers. To those who joined the previous Ako Para sa Bata webinars, welcome back. For the first timers, welcome to the Ako Para sa Bata community. On behalf of the Child Protection Network Foundation and UNICEF, we are deeply grateful for your continued support. Ako, tayo, para sa bata. I hope everyone is recovering well in the aftermath of the typhoon. And I know that many parts of Luzon are still suffering from the aftermath of this typhoon. And if you are joining us and you are in that region, thank you for taking the time out to be with us this morning. So in this session, our aim is for parents, guardians, and caregivers to reframe their understanding of their role as teachers to that of facilitators of learning. And I saw that a lot of the participants this morning have a child or a relative who is on online learning. So our objective specifically for all of you is by the end of this seminar or this webinar, we will be able to respect your child's unique learning style and make learning enjoyable. Recognize that your children are wired to learn and can learn in a supportive environment. And that you allow your children to participate actively in the learning process. And we all should collaborate closely and give feedback to the school regarding the appropriateness of the workload and effectiveness of the strategies that they use for online learning. And hopefully at the end of this webinar, parents are empowered to curate and use the resources for learning on the internet. And lastly, but not the least, is to be able to manage your own stress and that of your children. I would like to introduce the speaker. This has been pre-recorded, but she will be able to join us later for the live Q&A. Dr. Maria Isabel O. Quilendrino is a developmental and behavioral pediatrician. As a developmental and behavioral pediatrician, you deal with all concerns related to a child's growth, development, behavior, emotions, and learning. I am proud to have mentored Dr. Isa through her residency and fellowship. From an early time, I saw her potential and her interest in both child development and child protection. And she is presently a colleague of mine in the University of the Philippines. Furthermore, her interest in research and nutrition has led her to the practice of health optimization medicine after becoming board certified in nutritional medicine in Belgium. She is also a student in Masters in Science for Clinical Epidemiology and an associate professor, my colleague in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of the Philippines College of Medicine. A wife to a surgeon and remission coach, and a proud mom to three energetic boys. During this pandemic, she has added a parent teacher to her many hats when she chose to homeschool her children for the first time. So let's all watch Dr. Quilendrino's presentation entitled Education During the COVID-19 Pandemic.
Hi, I'm Dr. Isabel Quilendrino, a developmental and behavioral pediatrician, and I am glad to be with you today. I would like to thank the organizing committee of Ako Para sa Bata for having me in this webinar. For many Filipinos, education was challenging enough even prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are faced with a new learning crisis as students, families, and schools equip themselves to migrate to a new system for learning. The pandemic has also brought to fore inequalities in access and educational opportunities for students. While our educational authorities find ways to address this crisis, it is also looking for opportunities to reshape the way education is delivered to students. Following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic across the world, many nations experienced the shutdown of their economies, which has affected different sectors, including education. Virtual learning interventions and solutions were rolled out to support continuation of learning. In my talk today, I wish to revisit the definitions of learning, schooling, and education, and discuss them in the context of the current pandemic. I wish to describe the different platforms of learning available to us during this pandemic and the associated challenges in each. I will tackle the role of parents in the education of children at this time. I will discuss how parents can determine goodness of fit for the learning program. And lastly, I will briefly share my journey as a parent educator for my three children. Let me proceed to reviewing the definition for some words, beginning with learning. So the Oxford Dictionary defines learning as the knowledge acquired through experience, study, or by being taught. However, educational researchers agree that learning is deeper than memorization and information recall. Learning is in fact a lifelong process that leads to change, which occurs as a result of experience and should increase the potential for improved performance and future learning. Learning is not a mere quantitative increase in knowledge, but an acquisition of understanding reality in a different way and interpreting it. The Oxford Dictionary defines schooling as the act of formal teaching. It is the process of being formally educated in a school. Lastly, education pertains to the knowledge acquired by formal and informal means of learning and instruction. The formal aspect of education is always systematic, pre-scheduled, and well administered by authorities. In addition, each stage of formal education usually leads to higher levels of education. On the other hand, informal means of knowledge acquisition include learning from peers, working situations, from sources like books, online sources, and free lecture sessions that can take place outside educational institutions. It is noteworthy that the term education stands for both these formal, institutionalized, and informal, more personalized ways of learning. We undoubtedly need education, but we can learn and become educated in a variety of platforms in or outside a school system. Having these definitions clarified, we come to the understanding that learning can go on even while schools have shut down, and that education may be supported in a variety of platforms in or outside a school system. It is important for parents to adopt this perspective as they move forward in their new home learning journey. While there are certain standards that basic education should adhere to, our novel situation has highlighted the fact that education should go on and can go on even outside the four walls of the school. The pandemic has pushed parents into a new role, which entails greater responsibility and deeper involvement in their children's education. For many, this is so much more than they have signed up for or anticipated. Many of us were not prepared for this financially, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Which ones can you identify with? I can honestly say, having felt at least five in the list. Parents and educators alike are worried about the learning trajectory of children during this pandemic. While academic achievement may take a backseat, as some schools have shortened the school year or decongested their curriculum, learning does not necessarily slow down. Learning not only comes from conscious and deliberate teaching, but is the product of participation in life. And life goes on, whatever we make of it during this pandemic. Sadly, it is this same fear that have caused some schools to overload students with their curricular demands. Parents have the following concerns. How do I divide my time between working and supporting my child at home? It is not uncommon to hear this from parents. I can't support my child's learning because I am not a teacher. I don't have an education degree. A parent might have just lost a job and has very limited resources to support the requirements, whether technology or non-technology, for the new educational system. And then, a space conducive for work and learning from home is a concern for many. For some families, the new system is alien to them, and children are more easily distracted at home. Finally, many parents are aware of shortcomings in their attitude. Sadly, we hear lines like, wala akong tiyaga, high blood lang ako, nag-aaway na kami. Hindi ko siya mapasunod, nahihirapan na ako. Regardless of socioeconomic status or educational attainment of the parent. On the other hand, some parents choose to rise to the challenge and evolve their game. An online survey in Nigeria looked at how parents were supporting their children's learning during this pandemic. It would be interesting to administer the same survey to Filipino parents. So they asked whether they were helping their children learn. 83% of the parents in the survey affirmed that they were actively helping their children learn during the pandemic. When they asked parents not supporting their children why that was the case, the majority reported that they did not know how to because they were not teachers. Other reasons cited were that parents were too busy at that time or could not afford the cost of supporting their children's learning. This figure shows the various ways parents reported supporting their children in their learning, ranging from low-tech platforms such as radio and television to high-tech platforms such as online classes and virtual conferencing. The researchers went further to analyze the data by educational background of parents. They found that parents who said they did not know how to support their children's learning remotely were more likely to be parents who had attained secondary education or lower. The parents reported being too busy to support their child's remote learning during the pandemic were more likely to be parents with post secondary education and who were currently employed. The differences between these two groups were also statistically significant. These findings provide evidence not just that some children may have been missing out on learning during the pandemic, but that the reasons for their exclusion from learning varies along the lines of their parents' education, among other factors. While some people believe that we are all in the same boat in this pandemic, the reality is that we are not in the same boat. We are facing the same storm, yes, but we are in different boats. We are all just trying to stay afloat. Each family's circumstances affect their perception of the COVID 19 pandemic, as well as their ability to cope, from how they are able to work from home and how the parents are able to support their children's learning at home. The inequality of access to education is not the new problem, but the COVID 19 pandemic further exacerbated this problem as schools remain closed. Let me proceed to describing the different platforms available to us today before I discuss parent roles in education. In my search for the definitions of the terms, I discovered that the educational system does not universally agree on all of the terms. It is easy to get confused with these terms. I also learned that the terms online learning, virtual learning, e-learning, distance learning, and blended learning are actually unique. Each refers to the act of using technology in learning, but how students engage in that process is slightly different, as I will point out later on. It is important for educators as well as parents to understand these terms and their differences so they can make an informed choice, manage their expectations, and be able to do their part. Online learning always involves an internet connection and can include virtual face-to-face interactions, such as the use of Zoom and similar platforms for virtual meetings, webinars, and online lectures. It is the use of online tools for learning, such as online curriculum or virtual classrooms or conferencing software, as I said, such as Zoom. Here are the challenges our students face as they receive online instruction from their homes. I know of students who become very irritable or even become highly anxious when they encounter connectivity issues. In some of my patients, this becomes a trigger for a meltdown. For students, especially the younger ones, it is important to identify aspects that enhance student engagement. Though virtual, teachers need to be able to establish a relationship with their students. The lack of actual interaction, immediacy, and spontaneity make this very challenging. Younger students find it more challenging to stay seated for long periods and distractions may come from the environment or the computer itself when they are able to have multiple windows, such as what you can see in the picture of this slide. A student can actually have his attention divided. Lastly, children benefit from immediate feedback for their performance and behavior. And this can be very hard to do, especially in a large online class. We must keep in mind that well-planned online learning experiences, such as those that have existed prior to the pandemic and those which have come out of this pandemic, are meaningfully different from courses offered in response to a crisis. There is so much more to be discussed about the variants of online education, but that is for another forum. Effective online education entails careful instructional design, planning, and uses a systematic model for design and development. It is this careful design process that may be absent in many cases of emergency shifts during this pandemic. Hence, a group of educators have proposed a specific term for the type of online instruction being delivered in these pressing circumstances, which do not yet fully embody the principles of a well-established online learning program. So they propose to call it emergency remote learning and teaching. This term is preferred by active members of the academic community in order to draw a clear contrast to high quality online education. It involves the use of remote teaching solutions for instruction or education that would otherwise be delivered face to face or as blended or hybrid courses, and that will return to that format once the crisis or emergency has abated. So, the primary objective in these circumstances is not to recreate a robust educational ecosystem, which is online, but rather to provide temporary access to instruction and instructional supports in a manner that is quick to set up and is reliably available during this emergency. When we understand ERT in this manner, we can start to divorce it from true online learning. While some schools might eventually be able to develop robust online programs, the term and objective of emergency remote teaching is what applies to majority of our school programs at this time. Now let's go to distance learning. So it shares the same structure as online learning. Its specific purpose, however, is to attract students from all locations. So it can provide instruction to someone learning in a different time and place than that of the teacher and other students. Distance learning programs have allowed students to access courses from universities abroad, for example. Technically, majority of our students are still within the same geographical locations of their providers. So this term may not necessarily apply to our setup. Of course, the applicable distance may be subject for debate. Next, virtual learning pertains to instruction that is delivered through the internet, software, or both. It can be used inside or outside the physical building of the educational organization. So even prior to this pandemic, even schools have been employing virtual learning to enhance the students' learning experience. The instruction most commonly takes place in an online environment. Hence, some programs are described more specifically as online virtual learning, such as during this pandemic. Now let's go to blended learning. So blended learning is a style of education in which students learn via electronic and online media, as well as traditional face-to-face or in-person teaching. The term blended learning is generally applied to the practice of using both online and in-person learning experiences when teaching students. So it is also known as hybrid learning, mixed mode learning, and blended learning experiences may vary widely in design and execution from school to school. So, in general, teachers meet students for synchronous sessions, but lessons are also posted online for on demand access, allowing the students greater flexibility. It is highly likely that this will be an interim platform once schools transition to the post pandemic era. Finally, there is the option for homeschooling. Oxford very simply defines this as the education of children at home. And this is where confusion may arise when some parents think that they are homeschooling their kids just because they are learning from home. The true definition is more than that. Homeschooling started as a progressive movement in the 70s in which parents educate their children at home instead of sending them to a traditional public or private school. Families choose to homeschool for a variety of reasons. These may include dissatisfaction with the educational options available to them, or they might have different religious or educational philosophies. They might also have the belief that the children are not progressing within the traditional structure. And in the case of some families now, because of the pandemic, I'll share more about that at the end of my talk. According to Holt, author of the best-selling book Teach Your Own, the most important thing parents need to homeschool their children is to like them, enjoy their company, their physical presence, their energy, their foolishness, and passion. They have to enjoy all of their talk and questions, and even their quirks, and enjoy equally trying to answer those questions. For the majority of parents who homeschool, the only prerequisite is the desire to do so, along with a dedication to the educational process. Parents do not need an education degree to homeschool. All our students have a stay-at-home mandate from the Philippine government. While there are features that differentiate each platform, what is common for all of them right now during this pandemic is that students are at home learning. A student may be employing various platforms for their educational program. For example, a student may be homeschooling but actually employ online learning when he attends a foreign language class, for example. His learning experience may be enhanced with the use of virtual learning programs and software in selected subject areas. Parents have been known to be a child's first teacher from the moment a child is born and as they mature into adults. The traditional role of parents involve teaching, guiding, and raising children to become strong, standing members of their communities. As children begin formal schooling, most parents allow the school to take on a major part of their formal education. Where formal education is concerned, parents become mostly providers, ensuring that children have the needed provisions and support to access education and learning, except in cases where parents have taken the full responsibility of homeschooling their children. Since the pandemic started, parents are now taking on a more support-oriented role as they assist their children in their assignments and home projects. Hopefully assist, not doing these work for their children. Others take on more active roles as teachers, facilitators, collaborators, and managers. It is a sad reality that in some homes, however, parents or guardians are unable to play significant roles in their children's education. This happens in households where parents are unsupportive or absent, or when the home environment is not conducive to studies of whatever type. In these homes, the lack of support, lack of equipment, and connectivity makes studying at home almost impossible, especially for children with special needs and for those children with low motivation. Children who belong to these groups are more vulnerable at this time because they are more dependent on community services. For them, school and center-based interventions may be challenging to implement or recreate at home. They may also be at a higher risk for emotional and psychological problems and abuse. We now go to assessing goodness of fit. Families who are able to explore various options are indeed very fortunate. Given the choices presented, I encourage parents to make an informed choice about their child's education. There is no one platform that is best for all families, as the goodness of fit should be carefully considered looking at the following factors. Number one, well, I've said that families are in different boats. Two, we should look at parent attributes. What are their skills, attitudes, family values? Three, look at the child attributes. Is the platform appropriate for the child's age and learning style? Does he have other needs? At this point, allow me to use my family as a case study in illustrating the need to assess goodness of fit. Let's look at the family situation. Our family is fortunately relatively economically stable. Our home environment is conducive to learning, and we had flexible working schedules. During this pandemic, we prioritized strengthening connection among the members through shared learning experiences. We wanted the kids to stay flexible and adaptable to change. As parents, we are highly educated, flexible, I would say motivated to a great extent, and with a high sense of self-efficacy. In other words, we believe in our ability to succeed in our choice. Let's look at the children's attributes. So our three children are young, ages 11, 8, and 6. They are very energetic. They can be easily bored. They are curious. And at this age, we felt that a warm-bodied teacher will be better for them than an online or virtual teacher. They are also quite advanced in their studies. So our three boys were previously enrolled in a traditional all-boys school. We were grateful that the school was clear in creating and communicating the educational program for this school year. So they said that the curriculum was going to be delivered through online virtual classes, retaining the basic elements of their school attendance and instruction, while the coverage was going to be decongested and the grading system modified. With the children's consent and having gone through the discernment for the goodness of fit, we courageously opted out of the traditional school for this school year. For the eldest, it was a way for him to study at his own pace, possibly more advanced. For the second, it was a chance to pursue other interests. And for the youngest, having greater room to move. For all of them, having each other as classmates and spending more time with daddy and mommy. It was not an easy decision, admittedly overwhelming, and I am far from being a homeschooling expert. This choice entailed a paradigm shift, viewing the children now as learners and ourselves as facilitators. I share my story not to convince everyone to homeschool as I did, as I know it's not for everyone, but to send the message that parents should be more proactive. So these are my realizations from my personal journey in homeschooling. It may apply to other parents educating their children in other platforms. So these are my at-home learning realizations. So number one, I learned to take advantage of online learning resources, which at this age is a big boon to homeschoolers. The internet has made it possible for parents to connect with each other and share resources. Many online resources that previously came with fees are also currently being offered for free or given at huge discounts. Number two, be resourceful. You may not be an expert in all the subjects that you are going to have with your kids, but there are high quality materials prepared by others that you can use, or you can enroll them in selected classes. Just find the support you need. Number three, keep it simple. I resisted the strong urge to go crazy buying curriculum, materials, supports, books, and creating the Instagram worthy homeschooling corner. As a busy doctor, I chose to stick to the basics: a curriculum, a basic schedule, very basic school supplies. In fact, with the exception of our new textbooks, the rest of our school stuff this school year is proudly 80% recycled from the last school year. I also focused on keeping our space clean and neat. Number four, don't be overwhelmed. Create the school calendar, but take it one day at a time. Five, be flexible. One needs a schedule, but don't be afraid to adapt that schedule as necessary to make it work for you. Six, keep it interesting and fun. Vary the routine, learning forms, content, pacing to help keep the children learn in a fun environment and keep the lessons fresh. Of course, don't forget to play with your children. Number seven, be available but encourage independence. Help your child build responsibility and accountability for their education by including them in the planning and letting them track their own assignments. Number eight, not all lessons are in the books. There are far more valuable lessons that are not in the books. As their curiosity grows, I realize that I don't have the answers to all of their questions, and that's okay. We can look for the answers together. Sometimes they're the ones that teach me. Number nine, when things get too stressful, it's okay to take a break. Also, accept imperfections. Things don't always go as planned. Number 10, always choose to be kind to yourself and your kids. Exhausting and frustrating days will come, and there are many. What's important is that you're actively trying to give your child a better education and that you are all staying sane and safe at home. To summarize, here are my take home messages. Parents have to take a broader perspective of what learning and education is all about. Be proactive. Know your school. Know your family. Assess the goodness of it and make your choice. When you do, be committed to make it work. 3, pre, during, and post-pandemic, parents have to stay involved in their children's education. If your situation permits, take this time as an opportunity to have a greater participation, not only in your children's education, but in their life. 4, parents should also focus on the children's well-being, not just academic achievement. Focus on personal growth of all the family members. And lastly, in anything, choose kindness. To end, I am leaving you with this picture of a seed and a gardener. We ask, can the gardener make a seed grow? The seed grows into a plant by itself, given the right environment to thrive. The role of the gardener is to nurture the seed by finding and optimizing its environment. Thank you for your kind attention.
Leron sinta, buko ng papaya.
Thank you very much, Dr. Isa. As expected, that was an excellent presentation. And even though I myself have done this, have been a resource person for learning online, I learned a lot. And thank you for clarifying the various terminologies that we tend to use interchangeably when we talk about online or virtual learning. And I appreciate, and I'm sure a lot of the participants who are parents here, that you shared your own experiences. So later on, we will have Dr. Isa to join us in the live question and answer part. Now we go on to our next speaker, um, teacher Grace Flores Osho. Has been teaching for the past 23 years, and we have been resource speakers in two previous webinars on online learning as well. In addition, her degree in special education from UP Diliman, she is also an educational therapist and instructor of the National Institute for Learning Development after completing her courses in the Philippines and the United States. She relocated to Laguna to serve as a team leader for the special needs team of Brent International School, Manila. At present, she serves as principal for the International Rice Research Institute School in Los Baños, Laguna, and also works as the administrator for an early childhood center there. With the shift to remote learning during this pandemic, she has completed training for online learning and is now a certified educator for various online learning platforms. In the middle of these unique learning situations, she remains passionate about teaching for all types of learners, exploring the applications of cognitive science in the classroom and play as a medium for active learning. So Teacher Grace is married and has two children, one dog and one cat. So let's now watch Teacher Grace's presentation entitled Remote Learning, Managing Anxiety and Stress.
Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us this morning. It is my privilege to share with all of you what I have learned as a teacher and as a parent of two children during this time of remote learning. So, whose anxiety or whose stress are we going to be talking about this morning? So, this time of remote learning has brought about quite a bit of emotions for all of us, not just for us as parents or not just for us as educators, but more so for our children. So, in my short talk this morning, I hope to highlight the kinds of stress and anxiety that are brought about by remote learning for both parents and for children as well. And what can we do about these manifestations of anxiety and stress? How do we help our children? How do we support our parents? So, first of all, let's talk about how everyone is feeling right now because of the anxiety, because of the stress. These five statements on the slide are probably the common feelings of many of our students, many of our parents, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's also many of our teachers. So this is not an easy time for our parents, not an easy time for our students as well. So these are probably just the tip of the iceberg. Itong limang statements to, or these very short phrases on the screen. This is probably just the very tip of what a lot of our students and parents are feeling right now. So let's talk about stress. Why is there so much stress? What is it about remote learning that has caused stress for our parents and caused stress for our students as well? You know, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is we are all in this pandemic together. Magkakasama-sama tayo, pare-pareho tayong nasa pandemic na ito. Pare-pareho tayong meron tayong COVID-19 looming, above all of us. Pero iba-iba tayo ng reaction to it. Kasi iba-iba rin yung situation natin. Iba-iba yung nagkukos ng stress. But here are some general reasons why remote learning has brought about stress for our students and for our parents. So first of all, there is no motivation to study. Some of our students are struggling with a motivation to want to get up, sit in front of a laptop, interact with their teacher or their classmates through a screen for an hour or maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, or 4 hours a day. Part of the reason is because it's a very different structure. And our students are used to a specific kind of structure at school. And when there is zero structure at home, there is usually zero motivation to study as well. So having a structure really helps in addressing the motivation of a child to study. So one of the things that we can do to address this lack of motivation is to provide some sort of structure for our child. And this kind of structure can be a structure that's already provided by the school, or it could be something that the parents provide at home. Or it could be structure that you've learned from somebody else, and then you tweak it so that it matches the needs and the learning style of your own child. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this later on in my talk. So let's look at the second possible cause of stress. The second one is they are overwhelmed by their tasks. And this is something that I, as a parent, can identify with. I can see when my children are beginning to be overwhelmed by the sheer number of work they are expected to accomplish on their own. Sometimes our students, we forget that they are used to learning maybe a lot of things at school with their teacher to guide them or to facilitate their learning, or learning as part of a group. Pero learning on their own, some of our students are not learning in that way because that's not their learning style. So they're pretty overwhelmed by their tasks. They're pretty overwhelmed by everything they have to accomplish by 3 o'clock or by 4 o'clock or by 2:30. So what can we do to help them to address this stress? So one of the things we can do is we can break their tasks down into smaller chunks. And this is not just for the parents, but also for the teachers. Wag natin bagsakan ng isang malaking task yung estudyante natin and expect them to complete it without a hitch. Kailangan natin ibigay in smaller chunks throughout the day, and i-celebrate natin kung ano man yung ma-accomplish nila. One of the things we need to keep reminding ourselves as parents and teachers during this time is that our children are learning in very unusual circumstances. Whatever it is they are able to accomplish, whatever it is they are able to complete, should be celebrated because what they're doing right now is not easy. All right? So the third possible cause of stress is very closely related to the second one, which is the fact that they are overwhelmed by the deadlines. As you may well be aware, different schools have set up different structures for remote learning. Iba-iba yung expectations in different schools. Students or children are responding very differently. Our students are sometimes overwhelmed kasi parang ang dami nilang kailangan gawin and most of it on their own. So this is definitely going to cause some stress, especially for talking about younger students. This can be pretty overwhelming for them. Let's look at another possible cause of stress. Another possible cause of stress is the fact that there are so many distractions. Now you might think, but Teacher Grace, gumawa naman kami ng study area for our child. So meron siyang study area, dun siya nag-aaral, and we made sure na walang distractions. But what I mean about distractions are, even if we make the setup as close to being like school as much as possible, it is not school. So the mere fact that yung ating estudyante might be having their sessions or having their classes in their bedroom, which is their place of sleep, which is their place of relaxation, that takes quite a mind shift for our students. No? Yung iba naman nag-aaral sa, say, sa dining area o kaya sa sala. It's not going to be easy for some of them to transition to turning this location, this venue in our house, into a study area now. And it's easy to be distracted. Kasi pagtingin mo sa taas, nandun si kuya, nasa sarili niyang laptop, nag-aaral din siya. So mamaya naririnig mo pa siyang nasa Zoom class din. O kaya nandun si ate na naghahanda ng kakainin for lunch, or nandun si mommy na nagtatrabaho din. Yun yung mga distractions that are also affecting the way our students are learning at home. And that can be quite stressful for them. Okay? So another one is, sa bahay kasi, ang mga anak natin, hindi naman sila sanay na dire-diretso non-stop na nag-aaral, di ba? Hindi katulad sa school na alam nila na from, say, 7:30 hanggang 3 o'clock, nasa school lang sila. Sa bahay, they're going to want to have some sort of release. Kasi it's a very unusual learning setup. And they're going to want to look at different things in their house because not only is it distracting, but because it will provide them with some sort of release. And we're going to talk about that later and what we can do to address that. So another cause of stress is there's not enough communication with their teacher. Children, students are used to having their teacher as someone they can turn to and ask for clarification of a topic, of a lesson. Sanay silang tanungin si teacher. And because they might not have as much accessibility to teacher as they did before, this might cause some stress. So some students, some schools have made it very easy for their students to communicate with their teachers, and that's fantastic. But not all schools are set up that way. So we have to take into account that this could be a possible source of stress. And this last one that I have on this list is the lack of physical release. When we talk about studying in school, it's true, children are sitting down sa kanilang table, sa kanilang desk, and then they are listening to teacher, working, writing. Pero after 45 minutes, they stand up, they go to the next class, or they stand up and have recess or have lunch, or they can stand up and say go to PE or go to art. So merong diversion yung kanilang energy. And hindi sila kumbaga intensive learning the whole 6-hour period. Sa school, di ba? Kasi merong mga intervals which allows our children not just to switch on and off between something that takes a lot of concentration or focus, but they also have an opportunity to release some energy. So like I said, these statements that I've mentioned, these are just a few of the possible causes of stress, probably the most common, but these are ones that we cannot deny because one way or another, these factors are going to affect how well or how unwell remote learning is going to happen at home. Let's move on to another set of statements. And these are the possible causes of anxiety. So, ito namang possible causes for anxiety. Some of them are very similar to the possible causes of stress. And in fact, I should highlight at this point that some things that are a stress for other people are a cause of anxiety for other people. So these two lists can actually be quite interchangeable, no? Pwede ko actually gawin na isang listahan lang sila combined as possible causes of anxiety and stress. So, tingnan natin tong possible causes of anxiety naman ngayon. The very first one is one I would like to point out because my own child, this is the one that I definitely see affecting her the most. Learners are isolated and they miss the group dynamics of a class. There is a different kind of motivation that comes from learning with a partner or learning as part of a group. And our students, even though they are on screen and they can interact with their classmates on screen, it is a very different kind of group dynamic. It is definitely not the same as a face to face interaction. The second factor here is yung lack of motivation. This is something I already mentioned earlier. And as I said, this lack of motivation could be due to lack of structure, can be due to too much structure. So it's also good to identify bakit ba walang motivation yung ating anak o yung ating estudyante to study. And so even we as teachers, we have to step back and consider why are our students not motivated to work. The best way for us to find out is to touch base with our school parents. I work in a school that it's a small school, but we have a very supportive group of parents, and we touch base with them as often as possible because we want to find out how their child is reacting to remote learning. How is their child coping with the workload? And then as a team, the teachers and I, we discuss how do we adjust this? How do we make it better for our students? Speaking as an educator, we can only do that if parents will communicate to us and let us know that, alam mo, teacher grades, yung anak ko wala siyang nagawa last week. Kasi umiyak lang siya dahil nasa stress na siya or dahil hindi niya alam kung anong gagawin and napapagalitan ko siya. So it's good for us teachers to know that because unless parents tell us that, we wouldn't have any idea. Diba? Okay, so tuloy natin. Ano pa bang ibang possible causes of anxiety? Learners are adjusting to having their parents as teachers. You know, ang katotohanan niyan, tayo namang parents, tayo naman talaga yung unang teachers ng ating mga anak, di ba? Tayo yung kanilang unang mga guro in life. Tinuturuan sila maglakad, magsalita, kumanta ng baby pa lang sila. So we really are their teachers. Pero yung role kasi natin ngayon during remote learning, kakaibang klase in terms of teaching. Now we are the supervising teachers because we are the one checking to make sure that they're doing their work. We are the one checking to make sure that they are paying attention during a Zoom class. So it's a very different kind of teacher role. And our students, our learners, are adjusting to that. How do we as parents work as teachers and also preserve the relationship that we have with our own children? So we'll talk about that in a while as well. This next factor is something that we already discussed earlier. Learners are surrounded by distractions, and these distractions cause anxiety, and cause stress. So this last set of statements are particular to some factors that are beyond the student's control. So the first one, learners are following a new schedule for learning. Kakaiba yung schedule natin ngayon during remote learning, di ba? Kasi yung iba, mag-zoom lang sila say for 1 hour or 3 hours with their teacher, tapos sila na on their own. That's a relatively new schedule. And then the second statement on the slide says, learners are finding the lessons difficult or challenging to do on their own. And this is true whether your child is in kinder or in grade 12. There are going to be some lessons, especially brand new lessons, that are going to be taught this school year that will be challenging for our students to understand. Mahirap magturo ng bagong lesson during this time of the pandemic if we don't carefully consider how we as teachers are presenting it, how we're evaluating it, and how we are making sure na naintindihan talaga ng estudyante natin. And lastly, our students, our learners, are having to deal with technical difficulties. Totoo yan. Minsan mahina yung signal, choppy, or minsan walang internet at all. And I'm sure na-experience na natin lahat na mayroong times na nag-freeze tayo sa screen o nag-freeze yung estudyante natin sa screen. Hindi talaga natin alam kung anong percentage of what we teach narinig ng bata 100% during an online class. So we have to consider all of these factors that I just mentioned because any combination of these factors will affect the way that our students learn. And during this talk of mine, it is not my goal to provide a solution for each of these statements that I just shared. But my goal is to be able to share just some strategies to address the stress and the anxiety. Because overall, teachers and parents have to work together to come up with a setup that is going to be doable, effective, and efficient for the teachers, the parents, and most especially for our students. So let me talk about the ruler approach. First and foremost, one of the things we have to consider when we talk about remote learning and the anxiety and the stress that comes with it is we have to recognize that this whole setup affects the emotional aspect of our child. Emotions drive learning. And I think many of us parents have observed that in our students, have observed that in our children. And we as teachers should be aware of this connection as well between emotions and between learning. So the ruler approach, let me just share this quote with you about the ruler approach. So as I said, it was developed by the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And they said that emotions drive learning. It affects decision making, creativity, relationships, and health. And so, this portion of my talk will introduce all of us to the mood meter. So, let's take a look at the mood meter. Alam niyo po, just using this mood meter is going to be helpful in addressing some of those factors that cause anxiety or stress. So this first mood meter I'm sharing is a mood meter for young children. So for elementary students, siguro this would be a great mood meter to use. So as you can see, it is a chart divided into 4 sections: red, yellow, blue, and green. So what do these sections mean? So first of all, yung red emotions. In this example, it's emotions of being furious, nervous, worried, or angry. These red emotions are unpleasant emotions. So they make a child feel uncomfortable. Kumbaga, they're negative emotions. And they are very high energy. Pagpunta naman natin dun sa kabilang side, we look at the yellow section. Itong yellow section, siya naman yung opposite ng red, just as it is in this chart. In this chart, it shows the emotions of being cheerful, ecstatic, happy, or excited. And these emotions are all very pleasant emotions, a very comfortable kind of emotions, very positive sila. And, but they are also very high intensity, high energy emotions. So pag excited, talagang daming energy niyan. Pag excited, pag ecstatic, talagang may level of energy na, kumbaga, mahirap pantayan. Let's talk about the blue section. The blue section are unpleasant emotions. They're negative emotions in a way, if we want to classify it as negative, but they are low energy. So you being lonely, being sad, being hopeless, being rejected. These are unpleasant, low energy emotions. Yun naman pong green side, ito yung pleasant emotions, pero low energy din. So kumbaga, kalma lang, okay lang, content, being calm, being serene. So the way to use this mood meter, according to the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, is you ask your child to identify, how are you feeling today? And this might be something you can ask your child at the beginning of the day before he logs into his first class, or maybe even at the end of his first class, and just touch base with your child and ask them, how are you feeling today? You could use a similar chart like this and show it to them. Save it on your phone or print it out and just ask your child. It's important for our child to be able to um, label what they are feeling. It's important for children to see, for our children to see that it isn't healthy for them to stay in the blue and the red zone all the time. And as parents, if our children are sharing with us that they're constantly in the blue and red zone, we have to work with our child, work with our child's teacher to move our child to a more positive side of this chart. Because if our children are in the red zone or in the blue zone, these kinds of emotions will affect their motivation to learn. It is very difficult and I think almost impossible to get an angry child to learn anything. Okay, so I'm going to move back to the previous slide just to emphasize that, recognizing our children's emotion is the first step to addressing their anxiety or their stress. Recognize it, talk to your child about it so you can understand it, help your child to specify what kind of emotion it is they're feeling, and then give them a means to express it, and then help them to regulate it. And later we'll talk a little bit about how we can regulate those emotions. Let me move on to another example of the mood meter. The second example of the mood meter is for older children and even for adults. So parents, kahit po tayo, pwede natin gamitin tong mood meter to identify how we are feeling. The ruler approach is not just for children, it is for everybody. So even as parents, we should identify nasaan side tayo nitong chart. It's good for us parents to identify then saan tayo nanggagaling na emotion, because it's going to be very difficult for us to work with our child if we are constantly in the red and the blue zone. So these mood meters are tools that we can use as a starting point to discuss or address our children's anxiety and stress. It is not a solution, but it is definitely a tool to address the stress and anxiety. So here's a few things we can try. And just keeping kumbaga, our fingers on the pulse of our children's emotion is a good exercise for us parents to do as well. And it also helps our children to know that we are concerned about their emotional state, not just their academic state as well. Okay, both of these aspects of our children, their academic cognitive side, is as important as their emotional or affective side as well. So here's a few things that you can try. So this is an example of a schedule. In fact, this was developed by Teacher Vision, specifically for at-home learning during this time of COVID-19 around the world. Kung naghahanap kayo ng schedule, marami po dyan sa internet. For some of you, baka po yung school ng anak nyo nag-provide ng suggested schedule, or pwede rin you and your child sit down, gumawa kayo ng schedule together. But what I want to point out about this schedule is, one, it provides some much needed structure. If a child knows that he is only going to be studying for an hour, and then after that, he's going to do something else, say he's going to go outside and play with his dog, or he's going to get 30 minutes of screen time doing whatever he wants, or he's going to get to chat with his friends for 15-20 minutes. Pag alam kasi ng bata na this is what he can look forward to, it affects their motivation to work. So break down your child's school day at home into a schedule that intersperses academic time with little breaks in between. So tingnan niyo po itong schedule nito. This is just an example, and you can tweak this schedule to meet the needs of your child according to their school schedule for the day, and also according to the learning style of your child. Alam niyo po, merong mga bata na mas high energy sila sa umaga kaysa sa hapon. Meron namang mga bata na baliktad. And if a school will let you do your asynchronous sessions or asynchronous activities at any time during the day, I would suggest that you organize your schedule according to the energy level of your child. Kung kailan siya high energy, doon natin ilagay yung mga medyo mas mahirap na tasks for the day. Kumbaga, wag natin punuin na puro mahihirap sa isa or dalawang oras, tapos lahat ng madadali, the other way around. So, the schedule might not be fixed for the whole school year. The schedule might be something that you'll have to tweak during the school year. But having a schedule provides a much needed structure that will definitely help your child be more motivated to study. So here's another example, and this could be for younger students. This is just a daily task checklist. So in this particular example, you can write down or identify kung ano yung activities na gagawin ng anak. Merong nagtanong dati, kailangan bang bantayan natin ang mga anak natin during remote learning? And alam niyo po, walang isang definite answer for that. Kasi bawat school, iba ang approach, bawat school, iba ang expectations, bawat estudyante, iba rin ang learning style, and the way they handle this remote learning situation is going to be different. So, walang formula, kumbaga. Kailangan natin as parent, dahil tayo yung nasa bahay at nakikita natin yung anak natin and how they respond to this remote learning setup, we are the ones who are going to have to help our child address the schedule, address his stress, address his anxiety. So this is one way to do it. Here's one of my favorite resources that I would like to share with you. This was developed by a third grade teacher in the United States. And this was something she sent out to her parents and the students as well. So this is a daily SEL challenge, or a daily social emotional learning challenge. And what she has here is just a box, a series of boxes of different activities that are not academic. All of these activities have to do with something related to the child's emotions, the child's feelings, or addressing the child's anxiety or possible stress. Yung favorite ko, yung batang nakaupo sa beanbag. It says, create a calming corner or spot in your house with your favorite things. So, a child can do that. Nandun lang siya. Meron siyang area in the house where he can just sort of relax, downtime, settle in. And then another one is atong favorite ko dito ay yung spend time with a family member by watching a movie, playing a game, or taking a walk together. This is so very important kasi during this time of remote learning where we are our children's primary teacher at home, it's important that we nurture our relationship with our children by providing activities that are not academic in nature. And this whole grid gives us different ideas that parents can use to just give their child a social emotional break. So you can create your own, you can use this example, or you can pick a few from this chart and then start with that. But it is going to be important to provide your child with time during the day to do something that is related to their social emotional state. And when we address it in this way, it really helps to address the anxiety and the stress that they feel. And so I've come to my last slide for this morning, and I would just like to read this statement that I found on the NPR website. It says, be forgiving of yourself and your child. And I think this is something that I can definitely agree with, and many of us should definitely be doing this. And as it says in this statement, this is a stressful time. If you need to put on a movie to get through the day, that's absolutely fine. Humayun says, you don't have to homeschool if it's really going to cause severe emotional distress for everyone involved. And I think that's really important for parents to hear right now because we all feel so much personal pressure. Parents, first and foremost, I think that it's important that you give yourself a pat on the back because you have made it this far during this time of remote learning. And you may not have addressed remote learning, in the best way you possibly could. No one of us has been through this kind of pandemic before. And so this is a learning experience for many of us. And so be kind to yourself as a parent, be kind to your child. They are going through this the best way they can. So I would like to close by saying I wish you all the best, parents, parents/teachers. You are in a very unique position. So thank you very much, Bob. And I wish you all the best, good health, and stay safe, everybody.
Okay, salamat, Teacher Grace. Wasn't that such a practical and clear presentation? We're fortunate kasi si Teacher Grace is a very experienced teacher who actually conducts remote online learning. Ngayon nga, she's busy conducting a class, so she's not able to be with us. And I think ang nakikita nyo kay Teacher Grace na she's very kind in the tone of her voice and she's very flexible. Sana ganun din tayo lahat sa ating mga tinuturoang bata sa bahay. Okay. So as you know, itong November is National Children's Month, and we have been inviting youth representatives to share their insights and reactions to the presentations. As we continue to celebrate ang Buwan ng Bata, today, aside from a youth reactor, we also have a parent reactor. Okay. So we have with us Dr. Gerald Dizon Singson, who is the section head of otorhinolaryngology, head and neck surgery of Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital, and his daughter, Maria Victoria Isabel So Singson, a grade school student at St. Scholastica College, Manila. So let's welcome the parent-child tandem. Over to you.
So I've been asked to give a reaction about or actually a reflection with regards to the two speakers. And I must say that I have been quite enlightened ever since this lockdown and homeschooling has started. I actually just accepted that it's just like the same thing as when you're in school. No, I guess as a parent, sometimes we just want to just keep on moving forward. And we've been having disappointments, arguments about why the performance in school is not the same as it was before. But this event has actually enlightened me that as a parent, I should be adapting and I should be uh, more into my children's schooling and their feelings. I think all parents, because we have a lot of things going, we sometimes neglect and we just assume that everything will keep on moving forward the same way that it was. But like in our practice, everything has changed, and this for now will be the new normal. And it gives me that insight to see that we also have to change for our children and for ourselves. So I really love the lectures, and I congratulate the organizers for this. Thank you.
Well, I would like to start off by saying thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak here. And I very much enjoyed this presentation, and I agree with majority of the information given as a student. I have the only thing I really want to say is that I very much enjoyed the idea of a mood board for both parents and children, since sometimes we're too busy to actually say or express our emotions to each other, since we're either doing work or school related things. And that I like that both of the presenters use their experiences as teachers and parents for their presentations.
Thank you. Thank you, parent. And Isabel, right? Thank you for your inputs and sharing with us your insights. And Victoria pala. Victoria, so how do you feel do you like online learning, remote learning?
At first, it was a little bit stressful since I really wasn't used to it, but along the road, I sort of got used to it already, and I like online learning.
Okay, that's good. So you've adjusted to it already. And how are you and your dad or your mom? Who supervises you? Or you
Our
don't
our mom supervises us because her dad's at work.
so okay naman yung experience with mom being your
Yeah.
teacher. Right? Let's do some polls so we can interact with each other. Okay, so okay. So how are you feeling today? This is after or before the webinar? Okay. Ngayon, at this moment. So are you happy, excited, worried, angry, lonely, sad, content, or calm? You can have more than one answer. Okay, so we are happy, very good, and calm and content. So I guess these learning experiences and being connected, like virtually, also helps ease our anxiety and stress, no? Kasi tayo, we have to be connected to one another. It's stress relieving. Okay, so for our next poll, ito testo ah. According to teacher Grace, the E in the ruler approach stands for, ano dito? One answer lang ha, entertaining, expressing, echoing, or eliminating. Okay, put your answers. Answer the poll on your screen. Alala niyo ba? Very good. Listening, ah. Expressing, that's the correct answer. Okay, thank you very much for participating. Now, can I call on Dr. Isa Quilendrino to join me for the open forum? Hi, Dr. Isa. Okay, so Teacher Grace, as I mentioned earlier, is busy
Good
conducting
morning, Dr. Stella. Good morning, everyone.
yeah. Unfortunately, si Teacher Grace, kasi this webinars originally scheduled for November 12, so she couldn't be with us, but she's given me permission to answer on her behalf. Try my best. Okay. So what questions do we have? Okay. Okay. So I have a question from Facebook. It actually directed to either of us. The parents asking, paano if the parent is of low or has no educational background? How can you address, how can they be effective yata as parent teachers?
Okay. So I'll answer first, Dr. Stella. Okay, so it's actually a sad reality. I've pointed out the sad reality that despite the educational sector doing their best to offer different options to make education inclusive at this time, some students are really left behind for the reasons that I enumerated earlier in my talk, whether the parents might be unsupportive, absent, or feel that they are unable to support their child's learning remotely, or there might be child factors. So the child might have special needs that may be dependent on center-based or school-based interventions, or their environment might not be conducive to the learning of their child for whatever reason. Sometimes it's technology, it's the space, or it might be the family situation. For example, if their time is divided between performing responsibilities at home and staying with their child. So I do not have the answers, all the solutions to all the problems, unfortunately, but parents have to maintain this mindset that regardless of their educational background, as primary teachers of their children, they have something to teach, they have something to impart to their children. And as teacher Grace pointed out, parents can continue engaging their children in non-academic learning activities, not only to promote academic achievement, advancement, but more importantly, parents have to be nurturing, um, loving, so they can support their children and their whole family's mental and emotional well-being. So mindset and the perspective are two very important things regardless of the parent's skills.
I agree, Dr. Isa, kasi I think mindset is very important, and I want to emphasize that we have to have faith that children will learn. They can learn on their own. Hindi tayo fountain of knowledge, no? Being parents or adults, and I think nag-echo. What's wrong? Okay. So so we are not the fountain of knowledge. We have to have faith that they can learn despite us. And I think yung mga parents na sinasabi low educational achievement, what they can impart are life skills. Actually, they have the ability to simplify kasi ang nangyari sa education sa atin masyadong theoretical. So dapat ang parents yung nagbe-bridge. How do you apply this to real life? Okay, and I think no matter what your educational level, if you are living a productive life, kaya mo ipakita sa anak mo na itong theories, pwedeng ito. In real life, ito yung nangyayari. This is how you can understand this. So we also have to have faith in ourselves. Now, we don't have to be all good in theory. If we are doing productive things, let's let our children see na related yan. Education yan. Learning din yan. Okay. So we have another question here, and Dr. Isa, ito related also to how you answered it. Yung need, how can we advocate for children with special needs, especially enrolled in public schools? Yung modules daw ay ipinaparis nila sa regular school. So it's difficult for this parent kasi stressful for her, in working from home parent yata ang nagtanong nito.
Okay, so thank you po, Dr. Stella, and to our participant for that question. Actually, I would like to point out that public school students are not necessarily and not uniformly at a disadvantage during this pandemic, because as I mentioned, every learner is in a different boat, and sometimes it's even this public school module that might work for a child who was previously enrolled in a private school. For one, I know of several families who have transferred from the private school to a public school enrollment for the reason, aside from financial, for the reason that the modules might be a better fit for their situation, where the parent is able to implement the lessons in a more flexible, within a more flexible schedule. So that's one thing I wanted to point out with regards public school enrollment.
Hello, Teacher Grace. Welcome po.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for the welcome. It's nice to join you.
Able to catch up and join us. Alam mo, people are so impressed with your presentation.
Thank you.
So, Were you able to hear the question ng inana ni Dr. Isa?
Oh, sorry. My class just literally ended a few seconds ago. So do you mind repeating the question po, Dr. Manala?
How can we advocate for children with special needs, especially enrolled in public schools? Yung modules ay pinapares nila sa regular school. And this I don't know sa setup, pero as a parent and working parent at that, nahihirapan siya, nasi-stress din siya.
That is completely understandable, and I think just like I mentioned in my talk earlier, not only the students are stressed during this time, but parents are equally and probably even more stressed these days. No, my background is in special needs, and my understanding is that most schools, if you have a special needs student in your school, work is or should be modified for that student, even if it's not online learning. We all know, different students have different learning needs, whether it's a diagnosed need or just a different learning preference. But I think a lot of it will have to come from the school side in terms of being more flexible about their expectations and about their goals for our students with special needs. For example, are our goals for students with special needs just for them to complete the material or for them to actually learn anything from the material? Because if teachers, educators, and school administrators step back and consider that, then they might reconsider what it is that they are asking slash demanding from our students with special needs. School, and I'm sure the Dr. Isa said something about this earlier, school isn't just about transferring information to our students. Oftentimes teachers, we educators, and sometimes we parents also think that school is merely a place where we can literally dump information into the head of our children. But school is so much more than that. School is a place to learn, to understand. And if we think about our children with special needs who are having to deal with all of these modules that they cannot cope with, that they are unable to do on their own, then definitely there is very minimal learning going on. And if we just want our special needs students to comply, then compliance is probably not going to be an issue. They'll comply if necessary. Their parents, I know parents will do whatever is necessary to help their student comply. But school is not about compliance, school is about learning. And so as a parent, I think it is valuable for us to communicate to the teachers and to share with the teachers, share with the administrators that in this kind of setup, my child is not learning anything. My child is just answering the workbook. And I think many of us here in this Zoom room will agree that answering the workbook is not equivalent to learning anything. And so it really is a paradigm shift, and Dr. Isa, I saw that in Dr. Isa's slides, mentioned about, how we should all take that shift, the way we view learning and the way we understand learning, especially now during this time of remote learning for all of us. So I hope that answered the question kahit paano po.
Yeah, and another question here for you, I think, Teacher Grace, is I think similar to what you touched on. What are your thoughts about over-enthusiastic parents? She's a preschool teacher and she notices some parents are answering for their child. They are telling the answers and not allowing their child to figure it out for themselves. So how can you encourage parents not to do this because they are limiting the opportunities for their child to learn?
That's true. Thank you po, Dr. Estella. I think that's a reality, that schools naman have to face in a way, how do we deal with parents who are overly eager to support? Kumbaga, it's the wrong kind of support or maybe a misguided form of support that they're giving their children by providing way too much information. And, just like what I said earlier, when we do that, we are not allowing our child to learn. See, again, as Dr. Stella said, it's something I'd already mentioned earlier in my previous answer. When we tell the student that this is the answer to question number 2, that child didn't learn anything except to write down the answer. And so our preschoolers, especially our preschoolers, you know, and I teach in an early childhood school, preschoolers especially, they learn so much from the attempt to learn, from the process of learning, not just from getting the right answer. And that's what we parents need to be reminded of, that learning isn't just about getting answers or memorizing answers. One of my most favorite quotes about education is the reminder that education is all about the process and not about the product. And that's especially true when it comes to preschoolers, our kindergarten students, our early childhood learners. The process of learning is what makes it a learning experience. It's not getting the correct answer and knowing what it is. That's not the highlight of the learning experience.
Thank you. Excellently said. Dr. Isa, ay, you're nakamute.
So I wanted to add to that, Teacher Grace, thank you. So parents actually have to be oriented, as I also mentioned in my talk, to allow room for the development of their child's independence and responsibility, even if they are remotely learning at home. I've encountered some parents who unashamedly admitted to doing bulk of their children's work just to get it over with. So in this case, I think meeting the requirement or compliance has become a greater priority than learning itself. So parents need to realize that this can backfire in the long run. As as teacher facilitators, they need to realize that children have to learn how to learn.
Thank you, Dr. Isa.
Dr. Stella, can I just add to what Dr. Isa said? You know, this whole question, actually, the burden of this, the answer to this question falls on the hands of schools, school administrators, you know, school supervisors, principals, because if a system isn't working, it is our role as educators to stop, to evaluate, to reflect, and to adjust accordingly. You know, schools are not, we're not factories. We are places of learning. And I think during this time of remote learning, it is essential for teams of teachers, for faculty, for department to make sure that during this school year, we have frequent times to stop and evaluate how everyone is doing. How are the teachers coping? How are the students coping? And then to make necessary changes. Because I guarantee you that whatever it is we started implementing in August might not be as effective now in November as it was back then. So as teachers and educators, we have to keep learning as well.
Yes, that's true, Teacher Grace. This is a work in progress. It's imperfect. So dapat everybody should be open to evolving, to changing. If it doesn't work, change it. And we should, I think as parents, advocate, you speak your mind and let the school know that you're making this is too much. Nasa-stress na kami lahat. And I think for the last question, this is for Dr. Isa, how to differentiate being homeschool teacher and as a parent? Do we need to be authoritative? Because sometimes familiarity is a problem.
Okay, so thank you for that question. Parents are now playing a different role at home. We've pointed out that there is greater involvement demanded from our part, whether we are homeschooling in the real sense or acting as facilitators and manager for the online learning of children. As to the approach, of course, we want to remain positive in our approach in parenting as we do in teaching, we don't want to be resorting to punitive measures just to get our children to comply. I pointed out that it's very important to be kind, to adopt flexibility, promote overall well-being. So don't be focused too much on just the academic aspect of the child's daily activities. So involve the children in household chores, and don't forget to play with your child. So I know of a lot of households wherein parents are already complaining about their children not complying with them, and I remind them that you have to find the good balance between the formal learning activities and keeping the fun activities. So you might be missing on the chance to just have fun. Like there are days, for example, when we take a break, and if it becomes too stressful, we might play a board game instead. We might play Scrabble or just go outside to run around. So be positive, be kind, and remember to have fun for all the parents who are experiencing this extraordinary stress at this time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I think maybe because of the time limitations, maybe you can answer, or we'll just type the answers to some of the other questions that come out. So I'd like to wrap things up, and maybe the main message here is really that don't be scared, parents. Remember, you're the first teachers of your child. You have to have a little faith in yourself and understand that you are the one, if you work with your child, you're the one who knows your child's learning style. Okay? And let's not impose learning on children, meaning to say, knowing your child's type of learning, i-adjust mo. It's the best time really to be able, a parent, to adjust to their child's needs, no? And who else better to do it than the parent? Okay? And you are not, remember, you are not the fountain of knowledge. We have to have faith that children can learn. Okay? And it's not about, learning isn't about complying with requirements. And learning is really, ano yan eh, two-way. And we shouldn't impose learning on children. Okay? And I think the words that we hear here often said, be kind. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to your children. Okay? Don't be over neurotic about being the perfect teacher, because our neurosis, our stress will affect our children. And this is the opportunity really that we can make learning a positive experience and a bonding experience. We just have to embrace the times. Now, we're given this, let's make the most of it, and we can do it. Okay, thank you very much for participating, for everyone. Thank you very much to our excellent speakers, Dr. Isa and Teacher Grace. Your presentations were very much well received, and the participants were very impressed with it.